Brett, you've navigated some pretty incredible highs and some maybe you might consider devastating lows throughout your career. If someone met you today and knew nothing of your story, how would you explain what truly drives you?
Wow, it's a pretty big question. From a career standpoint, I was somebody that had like all the everything that you kind of would want from a career standpoint. Good schools, good jobs early on, but always had a desire to do something new, do something on my own, and had some successes, but also had a time when um, I had an opportunity to do something on my own. There are other people involved, people put money in, partners, and we did well for a while, but ultimately we failed. And the business failed. And when the business failed, and I don't want it to sound too passive, it was my fault. I mean, it was decisions I made along the way that positioned us just with too much risk. So probably more than anything from a business standpoint, um, that drives me because I know that a lot of the things that happened, it's not rocket science. Could have been prevented, could have been changed. And now with the tools I have, in addition to my experience, I think I can help people not just avoid that, but end up building great business.
Do you feel comfortable kind of going through some of those risks that
Yeah,
you kind of put the company in?
yeah, yeah. So, kind of background. I was, typical kind of business training. Um, Went to a good college, worked in banking for a few years, got my MBA, consulting, turnarounds, insurance, we were talking about earlier. And then when I went on my own, I was consulting and had an opportunity to get involved in a little healthcare company, a little diabetes healthcare company. A friend of mine owned, and my business partner and I invested in it. Um, Went well for about a year. And then he had a family tragedy, pulled out of the business. Business got in trouble, and we took it over. And we were able to grow that business well. We got it fixed, ended up with a really good business given this environment we're in. And this, that's a real fragmented space. It was diabetes supplies and medications. So at $13 million, dollars, we were probably one of the 80 or 90 biggest businesses. So it's very fragmented, right? Not huge businesses, but we had a good business. And we were doing well. Um, but as things started to change, as margins started to change, and some of this is Medicare rules, some of this was just, you know, things getting tighter from a procurement standpoint from all the insurance companies. Um, we started to double down on the medication side of the business, which is lower margin, required a lot more leverage. So I kind of took us down that path, thinking that it would differentiate us from our competition. And in a way, it did, but it just exposed us to too much risk. I mean,
Yeah, what led you down that path? Because I mean, I guess was differentiation the reason? I mean, is that what drove you to do it? And you thought that that would give you some sort of competitive advantage, or was there something else that started you down that path?
it it was I was probably a victim of our capabilities. Because we had the capabilities, we had a pharmacy that we had, and a lot of our competitors didn't. So we had a pharmacy that we had launched for the ability of being able to provide comprehensive services to people with diabetes. Um, and it did differentiate us, and it was fine in that respect. Um, I think what happened really was it was fear, and fear is not a great motivator. I was afraid that we would not be able to grow our business and achieve our goals purely on the medical equipment side, and especially given the things that are going with Medicare. So I looked at the medication side and said, this will be our way to provide more and serve our existing clients, and also provide some diversification that would protect us.
So you mentioned Medicare a couple times,
Mhm.
and I mean, so we work with lawyers a lot, and I've interviewed I don't know how hundreds of lawyers at this point. And sometimes we'll see where people will overreact to outside influences. So
Mhm.
you're talking about Medicare, and like immigration's a big thing right now where, there might be outside influences on that practice area. How do you balance maybe reacting too much to an outside influence like Medicare pricing, versus, like, so underreacting, I guess. How do you balance those 2?
Um, I don't know that there's a balance as much as there is defining, look, these are the people that we're best prepared to serve. This is what we're passionate about. This is what we're great at. These are the people we're going to serve. And if it turns out that in this case, an external influence like Medicare um, starts, adding complexity, well, then there's a decision to be made. Am I going to dial back that part of the business and emphasize something else?
Sure.
Um, which I think would be the right decision to make, rather than what I made was, well, I'll just move to a different product set, which we just were not big enough to compete at the highest levels in.
Because what ultimately ended up happening with that company?
We failed. We ended up having to shut down the business. We sold part of it. We served our customers well and did a lot of the right things, but ultimately, we shut down the business, and I lost pretty much everything I had. When I started my EOS career, it was um, it was pretty dire.
So is that what drove you into EOS?
It was what caused me to very quickly burn the boats, as we say in the EOS world. So when I exited that business, we had used EOS in that business and had done well, but I'd self-implemented. Okay. And so I didn't have a coach looking at me and saying, look, you're, I was doing the tools well, but I didn't have a coach looking at me and saying, look, you're going down a path here that, you might want to, understand the risk better. But we'd used EOS. I understood it. When I exited that business, a friend of mine needed help putting EOS in his business. So I sat in the integrator seat. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with the details of EOS.
Very, very,
So I
very
sat in the
familiar.
integrator seat and we hired an outside implementer. And I saw what it would have looked like if I'd have done it right. So I went and got the EOS training. But certainly the fact that I was broke was an advantage early on.
It's interesting to me that you used EOS. It did not work. And I mean, did you know when you were
Oh,
running it that it wasn't working because you didn't have a coach?
it worked. I just didn't work.
Interesting.
It
Okay.
worked. EOS worked. The tools worked. The systems worked. We grew the business. We hit our goals. Okay? But I didn't build a healthy team. So in the EOS world, we always talk about 3 things: vision, traction, and healthy. Crystal clear vision. We did a pretty good job at that. Traction, we did a great job at that. We didn't build a healthy team. I thought that I could make all the decisions and be the smartest guy in the room, and that was and honestly, as egotistical as it sounds, I thought I was coming from a good place. I thought I was doing it in the way that would best serve my clients and my employees.
Yeah.
I was just wrong.